Hey, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host Paul, and earlier you saw Max on the gun. So let me ask you guys a question. Who here is looking for the ultimate do-it-all LPVO? Raise your hand. Well, today we're gonna add one for your consideration. And it's from those guys who are known for making precision rifle scopes, the March 1-10 from Dion Optical. Well, as you guys know, it's super hard to cram all the right features into a compact optic just like this. But I'll tell you guys what, these guys came really close. So to see why that is, we're gonna take a closer look at this optic right now. So let's go. So if you put a bunch of scopes in a lineup, you'll be able to pick this one out right away. This is the shortest LPVO we've seen so far at only 8.4 inches, and that's short compared to the average of 10 inches. So when this thing is mounted, the scope barely hangs over the handguard. Speaking of mounting, the scope body is also not typical. Towards the rear, you have a standard 30mm tube, but once you move toward the objective, the front end is a non-standard 33mm. Therefore, you're going to need a special mount for this guy. Now, the one you're seeing here is from Audir in Italy, which they specifically make for this scope. There's no QD on this one, so it comes in at around 7 ounces. The mount worked just fine for us, but one thing you'll notice is that you're limited in how far you can push the scope forward and still stay on the upper receiver. There's at least one other manufacturer making scope rings for this, so I'll link it below. And lastly, since we mentioned weight, the scope itself comes in at 17.8 ounces. So that's right, this 1-10 weighs about the same as some 1-6s. And considering you have 10x at the top end, this scope packs more magnifying power per ounce than anything else available. It's very impressive engineering for sure, but we'll have to see if there's any compromises made to achieve that feat. So we've had our first impressions, and now let's see how the scope actually performs. And dialing to max brightness in this really harsh desert lighting, you can see that the center dot is just bright enough to pick up quickly for fast shooting. At 1x, the center dot's about 1 mil wide, so it's bigger than the TR25 dot, but is not quite as bright as the Vortex PST. I'd say the illumination reminds me a lot of the Leupold VX6 we looked at several years back. So even without illumination, I think the reticle at 1x has big enough crosshairs that illumination isn't really absolutely required. It helps that this scope is also a dual focal plane optic. What this means is that the center dot and these crosshairs reside in the second focal plane. So like the Vortex PST, they stay the same size. We'll talk more about this in the long range section. Outside of the reticle, it sits on some excellent Japanese glass. I don't know if it's the same as what you see in a Vortex Razor, but it's really close. I saw no signs of distortion toward the outer edges, so it's clear from center on out. Absolutely no complaints here when it comes to glass quality. Speaking of the Razor, one area where the mark doesn't quite add up is its field of view at 1x. At 101.5 feet, you're going to notice a bit of the scope body, so it's not going to appear as flat or as close to red dot performance as the Razor. However, I thought the eye box was generous enough that no matter where you shouldered the optic, it was still easy to focus on the target and find that lit reticle and start pressing off rounds pretty quickly. Now that we've taken a look inside, let's back out and talk externals. So for an LPVO, you typically don't dial, so I usually prefer low profile cap turrets. However, this demo model has exposed tactile turrets. So if your dialing is your thing, this scope is perfect for that because they work really well. You get plenty of positive feedback between clicks, and those clicks measure a precise 0.1 mil. So every click is 0.36 inches, 100 yards. Now looking back at the rear, you'll find the diopter and the zoom ring. One note about the diopter is that the entire eyepiece rotates. So if you're using flip caps, you'll want to set your diopter first, then put on your flip caps. As to the zoom ring, it takes you from 1-10 about 180 degrees, but turning it is not as smooth as the recent TR25, but definitely not as stiff as a Vortex Razor. This polymer throw lever that comes with it definitely helps, so you'll want to use that. So on the left, you'll find some interesting stuff. Foremost among them is the side focus / parallax adjustment. It's interesting because LPVOs generally don't have this knob, as you typically find them in only higher power scopes. However, I found that the default parallax for most LPVOs generally works well enough out to practical distances. Having said that, I like that this is included, so if you're going to shoot beyond 400 yards, I say choose a distance that works for you and dial it until you have no parallax at that distance. Now, on the end of this knob, you'll find the push button illumination to turn on and off, which is great, and the rotary brightness knobs going from 1-6. And as far as turning it, one issue you'll find right away is that it's hard to turn the illumination knob without also turning the side focus parallax, so it's almost moving as it's one piece here. I don't think that was a great design, so maybe in the next version you'll add more separation between these two important controls. Now that we've seen how the scope performs at short range, let's take a look at it when we zoom up. March has two reticles for this optic, the standard DR-1 or the newer tree-based DR-TR1. Both are mill-based, so there's no MOA or BDC here. Now, our demo scope has a DR-1 reticle, so it's a crosshair reticle with 1 mil subtensions. And there are a lot of them going all the way down the scope, and you got these little 5 mil increments along the way. And as mentioned earlier, there's a dual focal plane scope, so the center dot and the post stay the same size, but your mil stadia lines grow and shrink as you turn the magnification dial. I actually really like this approach since you typically want something very clean at 1x for fast shooting, but want some extra lines when you're going long. Speaking of extra lines, I think the TR1 is likely the better reticle since it has a ton more wind holds. Having said that, we had no problems using the DR-1s since we're used to simpler reticles like the Vortex Razor VMR-2. So to find your holds, Strelic has both reticles. So with our choice of 55 grain ammo, going 27-22 out of our 60-inch Criterion barrel, these are our holds. Notice that we could take this out to 900 yards if needed. So now that we have our holds, the next step is to test them on our known distance range. Our range has reduced size IPSCs from 200 to 400 yards, and we'll correct for misses if need be. So Max will be our shooter, so take it away, Max.
Hit. 300.
Hit.
That looks great. 400.
Hit. All right, everybody, we're back. So what's the final verdict on this March 1 to 10? So even with all the minor drawbacks that we mentioned earlier, I think these guys at Dion have come the closest as far as delivering a do-it-all LPVO optic. So this is a premium scope, of course, so you're gonna have to pay a premium price for it. But I think when you compare it to the other scopes that we did in our previous premium LPVO video, I think it's a very strong contender in that matchup. So that's it from us, but how about you guys? Have you seen anything that you would consider a close do-it-all LPVO optic? If you have, jump down in the comment section and leave your thoughts below. Considering how much these scopes are, I think it's a really good idea to explore all your available options. And lastly, as always, thanks again for visiting this channel, and we'll see you guys again next time.